As you know, Rivian just unveiled the Rivian R2 in addition to the R3 and the R3X. Very cool vehicle, specifically the R3X. But with the Rivian R2, we now have a clear competitor to the best-selling EV SUV, which is the Tesla Model Y. And in this video, I'm going to let you know which one I would buy based on mostly the design, but we're going to have a look at some of the spec and tech, also the front, side, and rear. And last but not least, the interior of these two cars. If I were to buy one of these today, which one would I pick? So first of all, let's have a look at this article from Auto Evolution. Some of the differences between these two. So the Tesla Model Y is currently the best-selling electric SUV and thus the Rivian R2's most important competitor. Now Rivian followed a similar recipe as Tesla, putting software front and center and designing its vehicle to be basically what I've been saying for a long time, computers on wheels. And that goes for Tesla as well, of course. So the Tesla fans might be more open to considering this Rivian based on that fact. So the R2 is Rivian's first product that will not be spared the competition, which means it will have to be amazing to steal customers from Tesla. And it hasn't launched yet, so I think we still need to wait until customers actually get this car in their hands before we can check, get a sense of what this car is all about, specifically when it comes to build quality. There were no off-road oriented EVs when the R1T and the R1S launched, and certainly no electric pickup trucks. Although Rivian refers to the R2 as a mid-size SUV, the Rivian is actually smaller than the Tesla Model Y. And when you look at these two, which of course we're going to do in a minute in Photoshop, it doesn't feel like it at all. It feels like the Tesla Model Y is a lot smaller than the boxier R2. So the Model Y is slightly longer and wider, but it's not as tall as the R2, and that has to do, of course, with the more off-road oriented styling of the R2, because the ground clearance of the R2 is 9.8 inches compared to the much lower 6.2 inches for the Tesla Model Y. So if you're looking for a SUV that is relatively capable to go on these trails, you might want to pick the R2 over the 6.2 inch ground clearance of the Tesla Model Y. And the R2 doesn't waste cabin space with the cramped third row that we have in the Model Y. Instead, it makes all the seats fold perfectly flat, a unique feature in this segment. I do think the idea for the third row seats for the Tesla Model Y is a pretty cool idea, specifically if you have very small kids. They're definitely not suitable for adults. Another benefit with the Rivian design is that it offers dual function tailgate, meaning that you can transport long objects by lowering the rear window instead of lifting the entire tailgate up. And you also have a cool little flashlight and a power bank integrated in the front doors, which is also another cool feature. And moving on to the power sources here, you have a claimed 300 miles of range for the R2, and as you can see, it's clearly a lot boxier than the Model Y, so we expect it to be close to 100 kilowatt hour of batteries, while the Tesla Model Y features an 82 kilowatt hour battery pack with up to 310 miles of range, but it also has a much sleeker design. That would be cool to see how much this boxy design actually affects the range. 0 to 60 times, we don't have the official numbers for the R2, but they say under 3 seconds, and that is for the tri-motor version. And that smokes the Tesla Model Y performance, now listed at 3.5 seconds. But there will be a refreshed Model Y coming out pretty soon. It's not going to change a lot of the proportions of the car, but they're probably going to have similar changes to the graphics like we saw on the Model 3 refresh. And it will also have more power, and it might have up to 600 horsepower without adding a third motor, and that will definitely drop the 0 to 60 time, even though the 0 to 60 time I don't feel is that important anymore. The big differences here for me though is of course the boxier, the two completely different styles of design on the exterior, but then you have a gauge cluster for the Rivian here that can display streams from the rear camera, one of 11 cameras installed on the R2. The R2 will cost around $45,000, but that is for the base single motor rear wheel drive version, and the base Model Y costs about $44,000. And as we said, the Model Y has another important advantage, is that you can actually buy it today, and you can't buy the R2 right now. You're gonna have to wait about 2 years. So with that said, let's jump in and have a look at both of these cars and the totally different design philosophies of these cars. So you can see the Rivian up here, the R2, looking very, very boxy. I actually really like this design. And I wasn't a huge fan of this front fascia that we have of Rivians, but I have to give it to Rivian because they have really nailed or hammered in their design identity and the features of the car to make it unmistakably a Rivian, and that is not an easy thing to do across an entire lineup of brand new cars from a brand new company like this, with these headlights as we are used to seeing from pretty much every single Rivian these days, except for the, I guess, the Amazon delivery trucks, which have a round headlights. We also have much beefier wheels and tires than compared to the Tesla Model Y, and this is the performance version down here with the, I do believe, 21-inch wheels. It comes with 20s for the Model 3, and look at the differences here in the design. Very boxy, sharp corners on the Rivian, while the Tesla Model Y has a lot more of automotive styling to it, with these very fluid lines. And also in the front end, we have this duck face that is typical for Teslas, which I think is going away for the refresh, just like they removed that for the Model 3 refresh as well, which I think is a mistake, because I think this line is a Tesla signature, and removing that will just make it look like a bland Chinese generic EV. Now moving on to the side view, and I think this is probably the clearest differences that we can see when it comes to the proportions. We have a extremely clear 3-box design for the Rivian. 1 box for the hood. The second, actually this is a 2-box since this is not a truck. So we have the second box right here being the rest of the car, the greenhouse, and very few lines and very few curvatures in this design. I actually like this design feature because it adds a little bit of different styling to the design to have this C-pillar being this thick. It also creates a little bit more of an identity for the Rivian. I also like these wheels because I think the wheels suit this overall design, and of course the more rugged off-road tires that we have on the R2 also feels like it suits a boxy, more static design that we have in the R2. Now looking at the Tesla Model Y, I don't think this is a bad design, but I want to bring your attention to one detail, and that is the positioning of the A-pillar and where it starts. So if we draw a line straight down on the A-pillar and then draw straight down, look at the distance from the center cap of the front axle to this line, and then compare it to the line where the A-pillar starts on the Model Y, you can see that it's a lot smaller. And what that does is that it makes the R2 actually look like a normal internal combustion engine. And I do always prefer the proportions of an internal combustion engine with this longer hood that we have in the front end, and the A-pillar and the greenhouse sitting further back than what we have in this little bit more bubbly design that we have on the Tesla Model Y. You can see all the lines and the curvatures that goes on here. But as I said, this has way more automotive, emotional design in it with a lot of beautiful lines in it. What I do think Tesla did here, though, to save some money is they essentially took the design of a Tesla Model 3 and then just raised it up. And what that does, it messes a little bit with the proportions, and I do definitely prefer the design of the Tesla Model 3, which I actually think is a really beautiful looking EV. And it makes it feel like the greenhouse maybe it's a little too tall to have some clean proportions. But of course, it adds functionality to the interior space. Looking at the rear end before we jump in to the last comparison, which is the interior, and this is, I think, where the Rivian R2 shines. I really like what's going on here, because have a look at this. We have the shoulder line cutting in here, a very strict shoulder line, and then we have another shoulder up here, creating this gorgeous chamfer that goes around here. Very product designy, but as I said in my R3 video, I think if that is your identity as a brand from the beginning, to be more of a consumer electronic inspired design, I still think it works well on the Rivian. And we also have this beautiful chamfer in the back that houses the big Rivian letters that has this angle to them. You can see that it has the letters themselves stick out from this chamfer in an angle. I also like the simplicity of this big juicy taillight that we have here. Also typical Rivian, and what they've done here is they've used very simplistic designs and graphics, but they still have a extremely strong brand identity. Looking at the Model Y, we're all familiar with this design, but have a look at how this line goes up and connects into the bumper line right here. I think this is a beautiful touch, and again, a lot more automotive design than what we have in the Rivian for sure. And another detail that just shows the automotive feel here is this integration of the diffuser, having Beautiful lines at the bottom, while the Rivian is super static all around. I'm also a fan of this roof spoiler that is integrated in the body. So you can see the air flows up here, goes down into this, and then shoots out down below these wings that we have integrated in the top part of the R2. A very cool little feature. Now, last but not least, the interior here. So the Tesla Model Y is due for a refresh, just like they did with the Tesla Model 3. But still, I don't think that even with the refresh that it looks as good and as high quality feel, at least. Again, we need to wait until these goes, the R2 comes out to customers to really get a proper feel for the quality and the vibe that you get from these cars. But looking at them just like this, I definitely prefer the Rivian materials and the design, because we have so many different material choices here. We have some wood here with the Rivian stamped in, nice chamfer going into these air vents here. We have a big screen that is not really well integrated, because just like they do on the R3, it doesn't have any integration to the chamfers behind it, but it creates some, I guess, storage space behind there if you can put some stuff in here. I'm not sure if they actually do have some storage behind there, but they should utilize that space in that way. But the big thing here is that we do have a gauge cluster that has sort of a housing to it with these two borders on the side. It's not too big, it doesn't have to be bigger than this. I also love these designs of the scroll wheels that we have on the steering wheel as well. You can see the entire wheel just sitting here, a huge wheel, not just a small little toggle that you have integrated on the spoke itself. Here, everything feels like the mechanical pieces are almost visible in the steering wheel. Nice stalks as well. And the steering wheel itself, if you compare this steering wheel to the steering wheel of the Tesla, it feels like the interior designers just put in more effort into designing this. It still looks very minimalistic, but it doesn't look sterile as the Tesla Model Y interior. So which one of these would I personally buy? It's gonna have to be the Rivian R2, even though I don't know how good of a car it will actually be until it comes out. But based on the design itself, I think Rivian has totally nailed their identity, as I said, and I do think the R2, compared to the bigger R1S, feels more of a size that I'm more interested in when it comes to SUVs, and it also sits a lot higher than a Tesla Model Y, so you can actually use it as an off-roader should you want to.